Hello, guys. We're about to start. Hi. Okay, let's all pretend you want to give me a round of applause. You're not pretending very well. One more. Thanks, guys. Oh, I didn't know you were so excited to talk about this. All right. We're moving on to the leader we want, but let's look back a little bit on what we heard earlier. We talked about issues, and we generally all agree that issues are good. We generally agree that even if we know issues are good, people don't really always vote according to issues. We understood that there are many issues, many challenges. We have corruption, inequality, a lack of accountability, dynasty politics, a whole shitload of things that we really don't want in this. Oh, I did it again. Many things we didn't want to do in this country. And granted that, none of my bosses are here. We're all fine. But granted all that, the takeaway is one, the situation is bad. The situation has been bad for quite a long time, and that the situation will continually be bad for a very long time into the future unless we do something about it. And that's a great shining light, the youth, because I think a lot of the people sitting here took responsibility for our screwed up future, but we need to fix it. So now we'll talk about the leader we want. And to start, but before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge the DLSU College of Liberal Arts for hosting this forum. A real round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so to start off our panel, I'd like to call to the stage Dean Tony Lavinia. There he is. Another real round. From the Ateneo School of Government.
Thank you, Patricia. Can you go to my first slide, please? So I actually changed the title from the leader I want to the leader we want because it should be a collective thing, because if it's only what you want, you might not get the leader that you want, right? But if we all band together, we can get the leader that we want. Next slide. I like, when I talk about politics in the Philippines, I actually like to start with this quotation from Antonio Gramsci, the founder of the Italian Communist Party, talking about Italy in the 40s when all the feudalism was being supplanted by capitalism and socialism was rising as an option and the Communist Party was being born. He said that the old is dying, but the new cannot be born. Unfortunately, I have been saying this since 2007 in every talk of politics that I have about the Philippines, that the old is dying, but the new cannot be born. And the other quotation I have is actually a Chinese proverb. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step in the right direction. Not just with the first step, but it must move towards the right direction. We don't really have to reinvent the wheel about the leader that we need to have. In 2010, next slide please, we in the Movement for Good Governance, Ma'am Winnie is our chair, and also in the Moral Force movement, which was chaired by Chief Justice Puno, we actually discussed among ourselves a lot about what kind of leaders that we need, no? And we said we need transformational leadership. Transformation leaders. And we actually tried to capture that with 3 words and 3 descriptions in Filipino. We want an effective leader, someone who gets things done, someone who brings us from A to Z. So, kapitan ng barko ng bayan. Diba? We're all one ship, as President Ramos always says, one ship, one team Philippines, move towards the same direction, get there. Second, we want an empowering leader. It's not just the leader that we follow, but it's actually a leader that empowers all of us by being a servant leader, making us believe in that person by his example and her example, and able to serve the country. So lingkod ng bayan is the phrase we founded for that. And then ethical leader, katiwala ng bayan, someone we can trust, someone who is not corrupt. So I thought that starting from here, I'd like to try to capture for 2016, try to do this in one word. I mean, what kind of leader do we want and do we want to vote for 2016? Next. I think we want a leader for the future. That's Mang Tasyon. I mean, of the Pilosopong Tasyo of Jose Rizal's Noli Me Tangere. If you go to Malacanang, the Malacanang Museum, and you move around, you'll see one of these sculpture stages of Pilosopong Tasyo, and I got that picture I took the picture from that. And if you reread again, Noli Me Tangere and the conversations between Ibarra and Pilosopong Tasyo there, it's always about the future. It's always about, well, the youth is important, education is important, because what we need is to build this country. What we need is to build for a future that we can be proud of. So my question now is, okay, what kind of leader for the future do you have? If we try to tease this out, what are the elements of that leadership for the future? Next. Well, I was actually asked specifically to talk about this, but it would have been one of the first because if you talk about the future, and when I talk about the future, I talk up to 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, even 100 years from now. I'm not talking about, just 2017 or 2018, but a longer view. And the longer view, any scenario about the Philippines in the longer view is that we will be severely challenged from a climate and a disaster point of view. So I want a leader with a long view of things, understanding what is at stake in terms of climate, in terms of environment, in terms of disasters. Because climate change is such a technical matter, a leader with some level of competence, understanding technical issues, understanding political issues at the global level. I mean, right now we are negotiating, and I'm actually in the Philippine delegation doing that, negotiating a global agreement, a new global agreement on climate change, which we are supposed to adopt in Paris in 2016. There's an opportunity there for the Philippines, including the Philippine President Aquino, to rise up in leadership, being a very climate vulnerable country. And so I want a president in 2016 who understands that, who understands the global dynamics, and is able to lead other countries to solve the problem. Because, next slide please, just to show that, and I'll go back to the previous slide. Because, climate change is not just a local problem. The first slide, the picture on the left is actually a picture of the only remaining house in an area in Cagayan de Oro when Typhoon Sendong hit us in 2009. I'm from Cagayan de Oro. Hit us in 2009. It tells us that the future of the country is our houses must be 3 or 4 or 5 stories high. No? And then there's a picture of a global climate change is a global issue and not just a local or national issue. Can you go back to the previous slide first? A leader that will be able to reorient the economy for climate resilience and for low emissions. Because the problem will not go away. We will have to learn to adapt with good land use policy, with food security policy, creating a national agency for disasters. And we have to reorient our energy system to be low emissions. Abandoning coal, which is unfortunately, we're leading towards a 50% coal energy system, but the future requires us to abandon that. If you look at the reorientation of economy, it requires very strong political will to do that. So to lead us to surmount climate change, the leader we want must have political will to make the tough decisions so that we are ready for a world that is where climate change is going to be a major challenge for us. Next slide, and then the slide after that, please. A leader that builds peace. There was some kind of discussion about that later on. I mean, right now, actually, I couldn't prepare for this earlier because I was involved in the Bangsamoro basic law processes in Congress, but thankfully they postponed the voting today. They postponed it to next week. But it's a very critical vote. I was telling colleagues here that you actually have a situation where you might end up with a Bangsamoro, because of Mama Sapano, you might end up with a Bangsamoro weaker than the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. That would be a farce. That would be their pathway to violence and conflict all over again. But on the other extreme, you might end up with a Bangsamoro that is unconstitutional and illegal. That too is a pathway to conflict. So finding the balance for that, I mean, is very important. I would like a leader, honestly, in the next administration that can conclude the peace agreement, a permanent peace settlement with the CPP, NDF, NPA, now the longest-running communist insurgency in the world, probably the longest-running insurgency. I don't think the communists will ever win, but they will never be defeated as well. So we really have to have a permanent peace settlement if we want to have a major source of conflict in the Philippines away. But for both the Bangsamoro, CPP, NDF, NPA conflict, you need a vision of inclusive as well as holistic peace based on justice. And therefore, significant social reforms must be needed. So again, political will. A leader that has a vision for peace and justice, and a leader that has a political will to get this to happen. A risk taker, because if you don't take risks, you will not be able to solve the conflicts that we have to address. But in taking risks also, learning to build consensus across. Because you have to bring the whole country. The idea of kapitan ng barko ng bayan, di ba? Walang iwanan. Kung si Tony, Maloto pa sa Gawad Kalinga, no? Walang iwanan. Everyone must be in that boat, di ba? And you don't kill people, you don't exclude people, you bring them all together. So I want a leader that would be able to do that. Next, please. A leader of the diaspora. 10 million of our countrymen, or maybe more, 10-15% of our fellow Filipinos are abroad. We know, we have the picture, of course, there of Mary Jane Veloso, so we're very familiar with that. The OFW challenge, again, has been staring at us in this last month. Thankfully, we didn't get very depressed after, because she was given a reprieve, although we had a lot of infighting when she came back about who saved her and not save her. And I mean, which I tried to avoid doing that, because I think it was a collective effort. But I would like a leader that would have an economic vision, so no one is forced by economic circumstances to leave the country. Okay? But I also want a leader with a vision of migration, because migration is a global phenomenon. I have been an OFW 2 or 3 times already in the last 30 years. No? I was actually a caregiver in Italy, just as an adventure when I was as old as many of you, and also as an international lawyer. And I mean, so I'd like Filipinos to be able to do that. It's a great experience to be a global worker, paid well, of course, and influential in your field. So I would like a leader that have a vision of migration that's strategic, right? Where we put people, we train people for these fields, for these sectors, for these countries, because there's a market for them. And also systematic support for them, because they do send a lot of money back home, and we owe that, including legal support for cases like this that happens. And because, this migration is something very personal, I think we want a leader that has a lot of compassion, that actually has a lot of empathy for those who leave the country and make sacrifices for their family and for the country. Next. I'd like a leader that's a builder of institutions. I don't know if this can happen in the next 6 years, but I hope that, we could plant the seeds. I would like a leader that can really lead a political party and not just build a coalition based on individuals. Every president, he abandons the party or doesn't take his party seriously, actually, and just tries to get the vote from everyone that he has. I mean, I'd like to have a president that actually says, I have a political party that's based on ideology, that's based on principles, that's based on a vision, and I will submit to the discipline of that political party. I'd like actually a federal system of government in the Philippines, being from Mindanao. The Bangsamoro is a step, if it's done right, the right balance of being constitutional at the same time practical, is done, and real autonomy and real fiscal autonomy, including it's given. But it's not the solution. I think you have to have eventually a federal system of government. I think Mayor Duterte, I was going to say President Duterte. And if I were a single issue person, I know we're not supposed to campaign, so I will not campaign. But if I were a single issue person, Duterte probably represents the strongest position now of a federal system of government. Sort of that's the only issue he's dealing with. But I don't know if that will be catch fire elsewhere except Mindanao and maybe a few places in the Visayas. A parliamentary system of government, I think, is really needed for the country to be able to have a real political party system. And I'd like to see that. Civil service, of course, we have all been saying that since the Marcos years, and so I hope we're really able to do a professional civil service that's beyond politics. Education, educational institutions, both public and private, because I think that's actually the solution to poverty, the best solution, the best pathway out of poverty for most people. Being a lawyer, of course, judiciary is very important for me. And the next election is very critical because you actually have, first you have the corruption cases, the PDAF cases, and whatever cases that are now there, that will basically come to the Supreme Court in the next 6 years. The new president will appoint 9 Supreme Court justices. So you can imagine. But a country that does not deliver justice to its people, and particularly the poor, I think democracy is doomed in that country because people will not care about democracy if they don't get justice. Next. It's the final, actually. I'd like a leader that inspires young people. And of course, all of us, kasama na rin kaming not very young. 50% of the electorate is between the age of 18 to 35 years old. Although 75% of that are, I think, out of that, only 25% are college graduates. So you are not the majority of the electorate. It's high school graduates. That is the plurality among the youth, right? So I'd like to actually know from you what kind of leader you want, because I teach a lot, no? I'm very proud to say that I finished in Ateneo after growing up in Mindanao and Cagayan de Oro. I did my first degree in Ateneo in philosophy, did my law in UP, and teach at the De La Salle College of Law, which is now the #3 law school, surpassing even Ateneo. For our first batch, I teach constitutional law in this building, so I'm quite familiar with this building. But I talk to a lot of young people, and this is what I see, and tell me if I'm wrong. I think young people certainly do not want corrupt leaders. That's a minimum. They want their leaders to lead by example. So if they have to choose between a corrupt leader and a not corrupt leader, they'll probably choose a not corrupt leader. I think the problem is many of you actually think that all politicians are corrupt. So you have to learn to make that distinction, because that's not true. That's really not true. I run a school of government, Ateneo School of Government. Half of my students are actually politicians, young politicians, and most of them are not corrupt. I have to tell you that. And I've worked with a lot of government people in the last 25 years, and most of them are actually not corrupt. So disabuse your mind out of that, right? There are corrupt people, there are corrupt politicians, but not, I would say not even majority, and not everyone would be corrupt. You want charismatic leaders. A leader that makes you stand up, right, and say, I go where you want us to go, right? So you have to look at our leaders, and is there a leader there that, you know, aside from Miriam Defensor Santiago, that like, Miriam Defensor Santiago was like that in 1992. I have to tell you that. When she spoke, you know, it was like, yes, I want to march, you know, because of you. I mean, Cory Aquino inspired people, but it was not because of her. It was anti-Marcos, no? ERAP, because just they like ERAP, and, you know, but they would not die for ERAP. But for Miriam in 1992, you had that sense of, wow, this is, and we want a leader that's that because we want to know where we want to go, and we want to believe in the leaders that will do that for us. We want someone who will ask, that's what I've been told, the best of us, the best of all of us, the best of the young, the best also of all Filipinos, rather than the worst of us. You know, I actually have lots of barangay counselors and barangay leaders that are my students, and they tell me the thing that they hate most is when they have to line up the way Ron Mendoza pointed out earlier. They still line up because that's part of the culture of leadership, diba? To get their share, you know, to get campaign expenses, and then to get their, I think the translation of balato is parang, diba, their consolation prize, diba? Out of the victory. So, and they said, I would really like a leader that will enable me to will actually demand me to sacrifice, and that it's worth to sacrifice. Finally, someone who articulates a shared national purpose. I mean, I haven't seen a leader like that for quite a while already. I mean, that sees everyone as one team, diba? And tries to bring everyone along. My last point there is everyone a leader. The thing is, the leader that we want is not sufficient to solve our problems. It's not sufficient to deal with all our challenges, including the challenges I deal with. That's, you know, with 100 million people in this country, with a very diverse geography, with all the economic and social justice issues we have to deal with, one leader is not enough. I mean, so we have to try to shoot for everyone a leader. As many of us that can be leaders where we are, with others, with the leader that we want. So, you know, to end, I'm quite hopeful, actually, that we will find that leader in 2016. But I can't tell you who I would like that leader to be. Thank you.
I'd like to know who that leader is. For our next speaker, our second for this panel, I'd like to call to the stage Dr. Francisco Magno of the DLSU Jesse Robredo Institute of Governance.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to discuss the leader I want based on a concept of I vote. Who would you vote for next? So first is integrity. So I'll just try to present a summary of the three qualities, three I's. First is integrity. Integrity speaks about adherence to affirm adherence to principles, next, incorruptibility, completeness, soundness. Next. Integrity in governance reforms, integrity of the state. A key aspect of a leader that exudes integrity is a commitment to preventing political capture of regulatory processes. Because a lot of the problems emanate from the confusion about what the leader is really serving. Who is the leader serving? Because you know, as individuals, we are nested in different communities. I use the concept of nested governance. As a person, you are part of a family, you are part of a barangay, you are part of a school, an organization, a fraternity, a social movement, different types of organizations. But as a leader with integrity, you want to prevent partisan interests to capture state processes, especially in revenue institutions. Next. Therefore, you want to strengthen public accountability. We have public accountability institutions. We have audit, oversight institutions, but we also have citizen oversight mechanisms. That's what we call social accountability. A leader with integrity would work for the passage of important bills. Examples would be the Freedom of Information, Whistleblowers Protection Bill, Anti-Bribery, People's Council. I speak about People's Council. I represent an institution here in De La Salle called Jesse Robredo Institute of Governance. So when Jesse Robredo was mayor of Naga City, he had this NGO People's Council. And now Congresswoman Leni Robredo has a bill in Congress advocating for people's councils in all local governance throughout the country, to have civil society participation in all local bodies, in all departments, in decision-making processes that matter. Anti-dynasty bill. We need to limit the level of political appointments. We have a presidential system of government, and in a presidential system, the president appoints key officials. But the thing about political appointments in this country is that the power of appointment is used very deep in the bureaucracy. Next, please. Down to the director level, the president can appoint a personnel, a leader in a bureaucracy. There needs to be continuing education for public officials and personnel. In France, there is a sabbatical. We are in a university. Here in La Salle, after 6 years, professors can take a sabbatical. No teaching. Sabbatical is a kind of rest, but you do it to improve yourself. Actually, sa atin meron din, di ba? May term limits. Pero ang nagsabbatical lang yata si Jesse Robredo after 3 terms of being mayor of Naga. Hindi siya tumakbo sa Kongreso. Instead, he went to Harvard University to take a second master's in public administration at the John F. Kennedy School of Government. So, governance is about being educated. We also have to support knowledge units and research and development towards evidence-based policymaking. So it will prevent a practice of just imagining policy. It should be imagining policy with evidence. And I think this has been mentioned previously by other speakers. Public education and integrity education programs being incorporated in the formal curriculum. It was Jean-Jacques Rousseau who talked about democracy being stable if it is anchored on public education. Kasi alam niyo ba nangyari after the French Revolution? So the French people kick out the monarchy. So it's the Republic of the People na. Kaya lang, kailangan ng participation, di ba? So participation requires skills. It's not just a feeling that you want to participate. You want to share something. You want to help. It's not enough to have a bleeding heart if you have false consciousness. That's why Jean-Jacques Rousseau talked about humans being born free but are everywhere in chains. So my second I is inclusiveness. Next. So it should be open to everyone, no limits, includes everything in between. It's all embracing. Next. How is it applied? There should be opportunities that induce engagement among government, citizens, and non-state organizations. Next. The challenge is how to institutionalize public participation. Now, there are certain reforms that have been pursued in the current administrations, such as budget partnership agreements, citizen participatory audits, but mostly these are pilot tests. And given the non-participation of citizens in many of these mechanisms, they sometimes are at a loss on how to really engage. On the supply side, government officials are also beginning to open up their budget mechanisms, their fiscal policy mechanisms. So both on the supply side and on the demand side, there is a need for actors, both on the state side and the non-state side or civil society side, to engage on a level field where both have access to information and both can actually use the data and advance mechanisms that will really integrate the understanding of budget expenditures into delivery of public services. Decentralization is a key aspect of fostering inclusiveness in governance. We have experiences in community-driven development and grassroots participatory planning and budgeting. These are not perfectly done, of course, but it's a beginning. And I think these processes should be continued. Given open data and transparency movements, these are things happening all around the world. For example, participatory budgeting in Porto Alegre in Brazil. What we have in the Philippines right now is an effort to open up budget fiscal information. We have a full disclosure policy portal being hosted by the Department of the Interior and Local Government, wherein 14 financial documents are now up in the website so that citizens can actually monitor how local government units are using their budget. But the challenge is really the analytical portion. So on the supply side of governance reform, you have open data, but then there is a paucity of users. The other aspect here to be considered is really the quality of the data that is being posted in the open data portal. You also have an extractive industries transparency initiative where revenues of extractive industries are going to be posted because, big extractive industries like mining, they produce so much revenue, and a portion of that actually goes to local governments. But how is the sharing mechanism being implemented? And how is the share of the local governments being used? Next. Very important would be the participation of vulnerable sectors that will lead to social protection, including women and children, senior citizens, persons with disability, indigenous people, informal settlers. Next. This leads me to my last I, which is innovation. Use of new ideas or methods, creative and ingenious approaches, responsiveness to current and potential problems. And this is the application would be, yes. In the public sector, new operational methods and arrangements to build or increase capacity in solving problems. Because, we have local government units that operate on the basis of political jurisdictions. But then problems do spill over boundaries. Like the problem of metropolitan areas. So you have traffic, solid waste management issues, environmental problems. There are spillover effects. When you have spillover effects, you need a broader governance mechanism that transcends traditional political boundaries. It may even require national government participation. That's why I cite here the case of the Metro Naga Development Council, Angat River Basin Council, Metro Iloilo Guimaras Council. So there is room for innovation. Our problem is that we have a local government code that was framed in 1991. And in every Congress, there is a proposal to amend the local government code. It provides for a section that encourages collaborative arrangements, but then it is a voluntary thing. Next. Principled negotiation that goes beyond positional bargaining with key partners, like public-private partnerships and multi-stakeholder governance councils. Next. Political innovation to engage stakeholders to identify problems and build support for effective solutions, like the idea of coalitions for change in basic education. We already have a law that provides for local government participation in the provision of key education services. Because a percentage of the real property tax collected goes to a special education fund where you have a local school board headed by the mayor with a co-chair from the Department of Education. So what this collaborative arrangement can do would be for the local school board to work and converge with the programs of the Department of Education. So for example, in the implementation of the K-12 basic education program, local governments can actually support activities that will help in the implementation of the senior high school program. For example, coming up with a program to match the types of senior education, technical and vocational education programs with local industry needs. So I'm concluding my presentation with emerging issues. We rely on old institutions to solve the present and emerging problems, while at the same time transforming capacities of old institutions to deal with today's realities. Governance is not only government. Solving today's collective action problems require collaborative governance. So we go back to our 3 I's. Our last slide is about I voting for 2016 on the basis of finding out who are the leaders with integrity. Next. Integrity, inclusiveness, and innovation. This is how I will vote. Thank you.
We'd like to call on our third speaker and last speaker for the panel. We'd like to call on Professor Leonor Briones, UP National College of Public Administration and Governance.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Mayong hapon kaninyong tanan ng mga Bisoy o taga Mindanao. I can see from where I am standing and even from where I was sitting a while ago that the level of energy and interest has already gone down. I'm very sorry I don't have a PowerPoint with all the beautiful images and photos which will impress our high-techy young people and even the middle-aged. I have the feeling I am, of course, obviously, I'm the oldest in this panel. In the same manner, and Winnie will kill me for this, that she was in the other panel. We were born in the same year. Before I proceed, I'd just like to make some comments on remarks that were made earlier. Hirap na ako sa pag-English. Kasi yung ating didesisyonan, ating pipiliin, ating paningin, dadalhin natin yan sa labas. Kumbinsido naman tayo lahat dito. Nag-overlap ang ating mga views. Ang ating mga statistics medyo, prove what we are trying to say. Ang challenge sa atin, yung pagpalabas. Ngayon, hindi ubra yung ating English, di ba? Now, I'd just like to comment on some of the remarks that were made, additional information. For example, Dr. Mendoza said, and it's new to me, that much of the investment, but not really new, much of investment is in Luzon. And if you talk about the budget, we keep on saying, and we have been saying this since 2006, 65% of the national budget goes to Luzon, and these are official data. 17% to the Visayas. So you hear about all those murderers, kidnappers, rapers from Samar and whatever province and from my very own Negros Oriental. And then 18% for Mindanao, which happens to be the largest, I'd like to think, most beautiful and most culturally diverse island in all of our islands. I'll repeat the numbers. 65% of the budget for Luzon, where the 10 richest provinces in the country are there. 17% to the Visayas, where 4 of the poorest provinces in the Visayas are there. And in Mindanao, where 10 of the poorest provinces in the country are. So if we talk about correlating and synchronizing budget responses to problems of poverty, which were discussed a while ago, then you have a problem. Also, I'd like to add to the information that was given by Dr. Magno about citizens' participation. Mention was made of the Open Budget Partnership, which was initiated by a multilateral, and the Citizens Participatory Budgeting initiated by the United Nations. But we have one which is even older, and that is the Alternative Budget Initiative of Social Watch Philippines, which does not only look at local budgets, but at the national budgets, and does not only engage the budget within the halls of Congress and of Senate, but going as far afield as the Supreme Court of the Philippines when we filed our opposition to the Development Acceleration Program and to the PDAF. So just additional information. So what is the kind of leader that we want? From the way the discussions are trending, we want, it seems, a professional leader. We want a rational leader. We want somebody from either of our schools, our favorite schools. We make it a habit to move from one school to the other. Now, what is the kind of leader that we want? What is the kind of leader that those outside of this hall, outside of the campus of UP, outside of the campus of Ateneo, and University of San Carlos, it was mentioned, or even UP Los Baños, want? And sociologist Randy David identifies these attributes for leaders into what he describes as the 4 ideal types of leaders. One is the modern manager, the one who goes high-tech, professional, schedules, etc. The moral exemplar, the absolutely squeaky, clean, inspirational leader. The stern enforcer, really strict, you know, the axe falls where it should fall, schedules have to be met, etc. And the protector provider, which of course is reflected in our dynastic policies and traditional politics. So, ulitin ko, 4 yung types. Ano bang type natin? No. Una, the moral exemplar, we have had them. The stern enforcer, and there are at least 2 rumored presidentiables who might fit this bill. We had 1 president. And then the protector provider. These are based on the original classic types of leadership for those who are taking sociology and public administration: the charismatic, the traditional, and the rational. Now, we in Social Watch, like many of the organizations which are represented here, we go through this annual exercise of looking at the programs as well as the personalities of the presidential candidates. And then we make more or less comments, or we grade them, or we rank them. Others have looked at current presidentiables. You only have to read all those columns and those blocks and those blogs. But I will not. It is, and I think we all know it, it is too dangerous, and one runs the risk of being targeted by the attack dogs of rival presidential candidates. And besides, as Winnie said, only one candidate has really come out openly to say that he's running for president. So I would like you to take you. I see so many of you are very young, going to finish college, just starting to work. Many of you are teaching, engaged in civil society work. So why don't we take a journey back to our past and look at our past presidents, their visible attributes, and their legacies. I, for one, if you ask me, who will the Filipinos vote for? In terms of history, in terms of predilection, in terms of culture, in terms of responses, I suspect that we will go for Weber's charismatic type or David's moral exemplar. Not very much of what we have discussed here. But you know, I'd like to be different. At my age, I can be different. Being charismatic and loved is not necessarily a bad thing, considering the magnitude and the seriousness of the problems that we are facing. You need somebody that you really believe in, who inspires you and whom you will follow and support. No? And some of these issues threaten to divide us as a people. BBL has been identified, freedom of information, graft and corruption. Winnie has been unceasing on this. So we need all the hope, the inspiration, the faith, and the commitment that a leader can master. We are not going to vote for an executive officer. That is what the executive secretary is for. Our invisible, never heard of, unpublic executive secretary who is supposed to take charge of implementing the decisions, the mandates for the executive. That is the job of the executive, to coordinate the work of the bureaucracy. We are not going to vote for a manager, for an administrative officer. We are going to vote for a leader, for a president. And we must never forget that the presidency is not a bureaucratic position. Now you have terms of reference, etc., etc. It is also a political position because leadership is largely political. Now, our voters through the years, we have never been able to understand our voters. We criticize them for voting for charismatic leaders. But however, these charismatic leaders are not just charismatic leaders, period. They had other gifts. So combination yan. And let us look at our past presidents. Aguinaldo. You all know what Aguinaldo did for us. Quezon. Even if he died of tuberculosis in another country, you also know what he fought for. But he got his wish of the Philippines being run by, like hell, by Filipinos. And then you have Manuel Rojas being president at a time with so much pressure from our former conquerors and also from the elite of the Philippines. Then you have Ramon Magsaysay. I don't think any of you know Ramon Magsaysay at all. Out of our 15 presidents, because I'm 74 years old, I was already conscious and of age at the time that Rojas was president. And not many of you will be able to describe, to see, to feel the impacts of these presidents on our lives. Now, Manuel Rojas, this is the Lolo, and please don't mistake me, was one of our most charismatic, eloquent presidents of our time. The usual thing, graduate of the College of Law, started as councilor, governor, congressman, became senator, etc., both in Spanish and in English. Last night, I stayed up late. That's why I could not make what we say in the Visayan, a PowerPoint. We could not make a PowerPoint because I was reviewing his speeches. I also reviewed the speeches of Ramon Magsaysay. Rojas was a guerrilla leader. He was a great crowd drawer. And he was even described as a general, whether it's true or not. You know, generals, you know. But what is his lasting legacy? I know because I wrote a professorial chair study of Manuel Rojas and fiscal policy, which is of interest, economics and fiscal policy. He was responsible for the creation of the Central Bank of the Philippines. a charismatic leader looking far enough to know that we needed a central bank. It was during his time that the National Economic Council, the precursor of the National Economic and Development Authority, which formulates development plans, started with him. And you should read what he wrote about why we need to plan. Because you have the Americans at our backs, and you have everybody else, and we have those whom we got rid of wanting to get in again. And he also created most of the departments you students of public administration and of law are familiar with. He created the structure, post-war structure of Philippine government. But at the same time, he was a charismatic person. So it's not necessarily, as I was saying, a sin to be charismatic. Okay. And he led the government, and this for me is the most impressive of all. At the time post-war, when the Philippines was suffering from a massive, huge deficit, nothing like what we are going now, where people were eating rats and so on. Philippines was the most damaged country after World War II. And he initiated the practice of what he called rescission of expenditures. You know, if you don't have the money and you cannot trace it and you have debts, etc., then you can, even if there is already an appropriation act, such expenditures can be stopped. Also, he's the only one that I know of all the presidents, this charismatic president, whom we think all that he knows is make speeches. He died while making a speech, of course, as you know, in Clark Air Base. He was the only one I know who borrowed money from the US government and later on returned it because he did not need it anymore, because he was able to increase the level of revenues. So, now, let us look at Ramon Magsaysay. We think of much loved presidents, but we can't go beyond 1970 presidents. I believe, and this is my personal view, this is not the view of Social Watch Philippines, and I think yung mga ka-generation ko will agree with me, he was perhaps the best loved president of all time, Ramon Magsaysay. He made huge crowds weep and cry over fascism, abuses of the military, graft and corruption, huge, huge, huge crowds. And I watched up to 3 o'clock in the morning film clips of his addresses to the people. They really hit you right here. And if you hear him, you will vote for him. But he's also known for initiating, once he became president, the comprehensive program of social justice for the first time. Remember, he talked about land for the landless and letting those who till the land own the land, sending off, giving people opportunities to go to Mindanao, which was then considered as a land of promise. And many of the families, prosperous families in Mindanao, including politicians, go back to their ninonos who went there during the time of Magsaysay. And this is why you have a city which is named after a general, and so on. Corazon Aquino cannot be described as a modern manager. You cannot describe her. You will be doing her a disservice if you say that she is a manager. But she belongs more to Weber's charismatic type of leadership. But nonetheless, and this will please Winnie very much, since he was a former member of the Cory cabinet, I believe, and I have written this, only the sponsor of the study refused to publish it, because in that book on graft and corruption, which I wrote, I said only Filipinos can solve graft and corruption. And I gave the example of the Cory administration. I called it the Cory model. Did she get a $300 million assistance to wipe up graft and corruption? Did she get all those eloquent speakers, graft experts from the United States, from Harvard, from Hong Kong, from Malaysia, from Indonesia? No. She put her cabinet to work. One, they had to make an analysis once they sat down of their departments, what the problems are, where the corrupt points are, where the temptations are, and they had to review regularly. I went through the volumes. This is not to say that I'm the most avid admirer of President Cory Aquino. I went through the reports of the cabinet members. They reported on how many cases were filed, what did they find out, what is wrong with their systems. The cabinet. The only addition and proposal which I made in my book is that because during that time, fighting corruption was considered as the exclusive responsibility of government, I said we should add civil society, we should add the citizens, and more important, and I believe in this, we should add faith-based organizations. You know, our donors cannot deal with faith-based organizations, but I have noted that they're the bravest, the most passionate fighters against corruption, and I said that. So, then you have Fidel Ramos. Fidel Ramos combined charisma and the what David describes as modern management. We all know that he would always demand complete staff work. We all know that the days of his cabinet members would start at 6 o'clock in the morning. By the time he has read all the newspapers, and he has to give instructions to them. Estrada. Estrada was excoriated for his deliberate use of Carabao English. But his competent and professional cabinet assured the highest spending levels for social development. And not recorded are the very vigorous and dynamic debates between the economic team of Estrada and the multilaterals, especially the International Monetary Fund. All of us are here together to identify what kind of leader we want. But we also must ask ourselves a practical question. Will the kind of leader we want win at this time in the 2016 election? We have to choose a leader who will also win. And this is why I have a personal preference. This is not Social Watch preference for a candidate who is not only competent, but is also charismatic. But on the competency side, a president look at Magsaysay, look at Cory Aquino. You know, you have to be very clear about Cory Aquino, Rojas the grandson, Rojas the grandfather, and so on. So there will be no confusion. They can still be effective with a professional cabinet. And this is why I also support, I don't know if it will work at all, it might sound crazy, but I also support the notion, somebody somewhere said, candidates for president should also announce those whom they consider for cabinet positions. Because you can have the straightest, most honest, the gentlest, the one with the loveliest, nicest, sexiest voice, but also you have also to look at the cabinet members. And also the person who will oversee the execution of all these decisions, which is the executive secretary. So that's what I am saying. Now, we have been campaigning because they said, you know, I have to follow instructions from the management, that we should look, also mention specific campaign issues, election issues. And of course, you all know that we have been monitoring the implementation of the MDG goals. We have challenged claims of spectacular success in achieving MDGs, and we said so at the beginning, and now it seems it is true. We cannot deliver on the poverty targets, on the maternal mortality targets. We will deliver on the infant mortality targets. Can you imagine infants growing up without mothers? I said this in an assembly of students in Silliman University. Who cares about Silliman University? There are only 3 universities in the Philippines. And then when I asked them, what do you think of the prospect of growing up without a mother? Because we have a very high level of infant mortality, a goal which we cannot reach, and which we admit cannot be reached. You know, so many of them started crying because some of them really did not have mothers. The others, They quarrel with their mother, they hate their mother, they make sumbong of their mother to their father, but the idea that there is no mother, and you still have millions of kids who will grow up without a mother. So we have been monitoring this. And we will continue monitoring because, charan, 2015, tapos na si MDG, we now have the Sustainable Development Goals. Instead of 8 development goals, we are so enthusiastic, in signing all these agreements. We send delegations of 200 people, bigger than the delegations of the richest countries. Sign. And we are committed now to the implementation of what we now call the Sustainable Development Goals, which, Tony, includes goals of environment and at the same time human rights goals. So instead of 8, we will have 17. And you can imagine how much that will cost. And insofar as corruption is concerned, as I was saying, we will support a candidate who encourages public participation. We had difficulty because we did not have a multilateral or a United Nations agency to support our wish to look at the budget. But we encourage those who will encourage public participation in national decisions, not only the local government budgets, but the national government budget as well. And I think you are aware of the famous statement of former Appropriations Committee Edse Lagman. And he said it in 2006, that Congress is able to examine only 23% of the budget after automatic appropriations, after transfers, after personal expenditures, and so on. So we really have no clear idea of how our money is going to be used. And so far as we will support also a candidate who has a clear program of governance, and many speakers said this, and who pledges non-partisan, non-selective action against wrongdoers, which is a public perception. And so let us not forget the immortal words of my favorite president, Ramon Magsaysay, who said, he's oft-quoted, but of course largely ignored, I will send my own father to jail if he commits corruption. Now, just a last word of advice. I'm seeing that you are a little bit awake, so I'm encouraged to continue. Like all lolas, pag makaumpisa na yan ng sermon, yung mga lola, ganado na, dahil nakikinig na yung mga apo. Anyway, I just have a word of advice against this phenomenon of hyper-presidentialism. I'm sure many of you, those in law, those in political science, are familiar with this word. This happens in systems of government where you have 3 branches of government. Alam na ninyo, ayun na yung mga 3 branches of government na yun, mga apo. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Constitution says, are they unequal or co-equal? They are co-equal. They are supposed to be equal. But when a dominant executive and a system where the 2 other branches of government are weak, and this is the definition, therefore, hyper-presidentialism can take place, and the dominant executive takes over the functions of the 2 other branches of government. And these questions have to be settled in the Supreme Court. And so we have to watch out against this. Studies have been made comparing, palagi naman talaga nating classmates ang mga Latin American countries, classmate natin yan, hyper-presidents, and the Philippines in Asia. Oo. Talagang, sikat na sikat tayo. Classmate natin yung mga gwapong Kastila-Roy doon sa Latin America. And we are among the countries which exhibit hyper-presidentialism. Such a situation, I say in my notes, is dangerous and threatens the balance of power among the 3 branches of government. And we should pay heed to Tony, who warns against perhaps, and not only perhaps, factually unconstitutional provisions in certain laws that we are now debating about. because it can lead to violations of the Constitution, resulting in long-drawn battles, divisive debates, and personal attacks. All of you who have been involved in the campaign to protect the integrity of the Constitution and the two other branches of government know the extent of the attacks. So voters have to watch out for candidates or parties who just might, under the guise of charismatic leadership, extend the strict boundaries of the presidential office and ignore the limits of the presidency. All of us think that there is no limit to the power of the president. There is a limit to the power of the president. Constitution says it. The two other branches of government limit the power of the presidency. So, in 2016, finally, ay, tumigil na si Tanda. We will vote. At saka, pagod na yung aking mga katuhuran. In 2016, we will vote for a new president. Hopefully, I will still be around to vote. But let us not only focus on competence, devotion to issues, because that can be changed, but let us also select one whom we can trust and love, as we have done in the past. One who can give us hope. 6 years ba naman, we need all the hope, we need all the inspiration, the kids need all the encouragement that can possibly come from the president. But let us also vote, kaya combination ito, for a candidate who can lead us with a competent cabinet, with responsible legislature, and professional advisors to the light at the end of the tunnel, and also civil society, of course. With all of us participating, kanina may nagtanong when you were winding up, ano nang gagawin natin? I wanted to stand up and say, let's get out of this hall and go out into the streets. Let's go to Mindanao. Let's go to the Visayas. Let's go to Tondo. And tell the people that this is the kind of leader that we want. So with all of us participating, with all of our help, and finally, with God's help, we just might get what we want and deserve. Thank you.
So we'll do the exact same thing we did earlier. We'll ask a few questions here, and then we'll open the questions also to social media, and then we'll open the questions to you later on. And I'm sorry if I will be asking the question I'm most interested in right now. Professor Briones, do you believe our president is charismatic? Our current president.
Charisma can be inherited. It can be part of, family associations. In Philippine culture, this is very important. Who is his mother? Who is his wife? Who is his lover? Who are his children? And so on. So in that sense, if you will recall, during the last 2010, was it 2010 elections, you could see how people responded to him as a personification of what his parents stood for. In that sense, maybe we can say it's an extended charisma, it's an associated charisma, but still, it's the kind of charisma that voters respond to.
But do you feel he is charismatic in himself, by the standards you set earlier?
At this time, it's difficult to say. Those who avidly adore him in media will answer your question positively. But those who are also watching policies, decisions, and public response to particular decisions may have mixed opinion. Very safe answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Very safe.
I would have preferred to learn from the wisdom of my elders.
I will share my elderly wisdom with you privately.
Slap down by the old lady. Okay. Gentlemen.
I'm in too much trouble already.
Gentlemen, do you have mixed feelings about the president? Do you feel that he is charismatic? Let's start with Dr. Magna. Do you feel that our current president has integrity, innovation, and inclusiveness?
Do I repeat my presentation? But speaking about charisma, I think he was able to maintain a very high percentage of approval, 60%, then slowly going down. So I suppose he was loved more than feared. But perhaps the fear factor should also be present. So I think that's where the challenge for most presidents really come from, the commitment and the strength to really implement difficult decisions in spite of having friends all around.
Dean, what do you think?
I think I agree with Liling that charisma in the campaign came from the parents, but I think following the explaining why the rating stayed high for very long, I think the charisma of this president is from his not being corrupt. Period. We and with no charges of personal corruption and his family's corruption. Not even Cory had that. I mean, Cory, there was always kamag-anak, etc. In terms of wealth and in terms of you have very little of that. I think for President Aquino it's more friends, mga classic, but in terms of but not also in terms of making money out of the government. That's a big thing, I think, for this country. But I'm mixed because there are also, of course, other things that we would have wanted from the president, right?
All right. In terms of, because I particularly remember the very long list of demands you make on the leader you want. You want him to get things done, to be a builder of institutions, to be a servant leader, to inspire the youth, to be charismatic, to have a long view of the future, and hopefully support climate change and federalism. Can this man exist?
Yes, of course.
Have you met this man?
And in the process of searching. And with this, in all of these things, I'm a student of politics and political personalities. I just, even without sort of a commitment to engage in the Philippines, I'm just academically interested and reading about that, historically. You have to emerge from that. And you might have qualities that make you ready for it, but you have to come out and challenge. I mean, so I would say right now there's no single person that has all of these things. But in the course of the campaign, in the early days of people making decisions whether they will run or not, I'm actually confident that among the list, the top of mind, as they call it, that we have among all of that, there's a number there, maybe 2 or 3, that might be able to rise up. I'm not sure, because they have to rise up, exactly. They have to be challenged, right? The moment, just announcing that you will run, or you will consider to run, the next day, the pressures are enormous.
The next day, the cases will land in the
there will be cases, for sure.
Of course.
Filed against you, that's being prepared probably at some point. There'll be, of course, financiers that will be, there'll be politicians that will be lining up, and you have to decide whether to be. So right there, you already will do that. But I think, I'll be honest, that's why I frame it as the leader for the future, because I actually don't. I think the President Aquino is a relatively good president, but that he's not a leader for the future, because he's a leader from the very beginning. He framed it about 2016, that he's always counting. It's over in 2016. I'm done in 2016. So it's in everything, in all of those issues. It's always about when I leave office. I just want to get things done. That's why the peace process is to end in 2016 and all of this. And many of the mistakes is because of that.
Okay, but as everyone said, President Aquino won with great love and trust, regardless of whether or not that love or trust was inherited or owned. granted that, how do you feel he performed according to how do you think he performed according to that amount of love and trust? How real was it for the people, and how soon into his presidency did the people begin to see maybe he really didn't own it anyway? I'd like to ask all three of you.
Can I?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, if you will recall, as soon as the president was elected, there were expectations of a clear development plan. And it took some years to come out with a development plan which reflected his platform. And it's the same with Yolanda. Yolanda happened in 2013. The estimates as well as the projects were finished in early 2014 with the resignation of the presidential assistant, submitted to the president sometime a few months later, approved finally in October 2014. So those are indicators of, this is why I'm saying that it's not only enough for a president to have charisma. He must also have the savvy to put up a cabinet which will implement these programs and make these dreams into reality, as well as, you know, full cooperation from a legislature, which perhaps it's too much to expect.
The criteria I would use is the criteria that he himself used in the campaign, which is poverty and corruption, right? So I think in poverty, for sure, you have a mixed record. But I think in the end, in terms of structures of poverty, I think we're left with the same problems we had in 2010, 2016. For corruption, it's mixed because huge things happen. I mean, 3 senators are in jail, quite a lot of cases. But I also think it's mixed because there is a perception that it was, there were political filters that were used for these charges. Very important was the decision of the Secretary of Justice not to pursue a third group of charges. Now, that's very, very important. And there's a reason why I emphasize that, not just out of, I want them charged, etc. But if I were the president in the next, or I won't be the president, but if I were working for the next president who wants to pardon all these people that have been charged, right? There's a very good reason for doing that, you know? Yes, they may be guilty, but there were lots of other people who were guilty, but politically they were spared. So if you want reconciliation in this country, do a blanket pardon. Because there were some people who were spared. And that's kind of tragic, right? I mean, when that happens, that's kind of tragic. But I can see that would be the thinking of some people. Not me, but some people.
I'm sure not you, sir. Never accused you of thinking that way. But instead of answering that question, though, I'd like to shoot a different question at you and then follow up to everyone. Because the whole day we've sort of been skirting the idea that there are actually people who have put themselves forward and said, maybe I want to run. Possibly I want to run. So we've set standards of what sort of leader we want. Innovation, charisma, servant leaders. So let's talk about the people on the plate. I think we've heard Professor Monsod's campaign against the presidency of Vice President Binay. But I would like to ask all of you, for example, let's go candidate by candidate. Do you guys feel that Vice President Binay may perhaps, regardless of what's been said today, may perhaps be the leader the Filipinos want? Isn't that fun?
Well,
was this agreed upon? I thought the rules were...
Rappler takes no responsibility for me.
Patricia.
Well, I use a very simple formula, 3 I's: integrity, inclusiveness, and innovation. So let me just focus on inclusiveness. I think Vice President Binay will qualify in inclusiveness. perhaps in the way he approaches people, he has charisma and he really goes to the masses. One of his main areas of engagement is the issue of overseas Filipino workers. So it has been very successful in his case because when the social weather stations came out with a survey, I think the top 3 reasons why people would approve of a government official, and that's true in the case of Vice President Binay, is his ability to connect with overseas Filipino workers. Perhaps more than connect, it's actually being able to use the issue effectively.
Okay.
Perhaps even without an invitation, he really reaches out. He travels to the overseas Filipino communities.
Let me share this with all of us who are largely based in Manila. While we are talking here, at the time of the last presidential elections, Binay was going around the Visayas and Mindanao and all places and meeting with people. And this is why when you were mentioning, and he has a large block of support in the Visayas and Mindanao. And when you recall the share of Visayas and Mindanao of the budget and the share of investments, of private investments, then you will understand why his going there resonates with many of them. And he's involved in social organizations like Rotary, Sister Cities. Makati is happily adopting many local government units who don't have sufficient funding. What I'm just trying to say is that he has a large reserve of support which he has been building up from the time he ran for vice president. But as to your question, as to my personal opinion about Binay Patricia, you know, one of the social media denizens commented, because they linked him, they said that Briones is a colleague of Binay. And sabi ng isa, siguro, ano kaya, bakit sila konektado silang dalawa? And then, sabi ng isa naman, ay kasi magkaedad kasi sila. Classmates siguro sila. And of course, he is from the College of Law. I'm from the College of Public Administration. So that's how people are connected. And I have to be very careful because I am not in the Binay camp at all. Although we of course are good friends. Including his son, who was my former student. But it's not about the presidency and all that. But, you know, what I'm just saying is probably if you have elections now, Visayas and Mindanao will carry him. That is,
Depending
unless
on
Duterte...
Depending if the other
Yes,
mayor,
yes.
the other mayor will
Yes,
run.
yes.
Oh,
If
that
the
should be
other mayor
interesting.
will run, this is why I was telling myself when Duterte made indications that he's interested, sabi ko, mababawasan yun si Binay. Kasi Duterte's, Mindanao also ang kanyang,
Okay, before we jump to audience questions, and I'm very sorry to the people who are timing downstairs, just very quickly.
Hindi mo papasagutin, thank you.
Ay, hindi, kasi mas mahirap to eh. Pero mabilis lang yung mga sagot. No need to explain. But we can't pretend that these names aren't out there. So, Binay, we don't doubt. His name is there. Duterte has already more or less kind of sort of said he's interested. More or less interested. We know that Rojas is still on the table. We know that Grace Poe has sort of talked about this too. And we know that Miriam Defensor Santiago did say she would like to. It doesn't mean she will. So granting these names, and perhaps you have new ones that I have not heard of, which of these people is the closest approximation of the leader you want? I mean, granting we have a year until 2016 and the possibility of finding someone new is difficult. Because I do remember the people on this stage telling me that we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to look at our candidates and not allow us to be taken in by what's happening. So I feel I need a good example to stand up for myself when I vote.
Speaking as academic, and not as a. But I want to actually talk about Bina as well first, and then I'll talk about what
Go on, sir.
I think. But just to be fair, I think for the diaspora, for what I said, the diaspora, I think for climate change, for peace, Bina is the most prepared. He knows his issues very well. He's thought about them. He can do things. Makati actually has done good things on climate change, on disaster. He knows the NDF, the NPA, the MILF, the MNLF, local government, federalism. He knows that all very well. I would have problems with BNI as an leaders for institutions, to build institutions, because I guess it doesn't come from that mold. And I'll ask you, will you stand up after BNI speak and let's march, and fix the Philippines? So I don't think he would be inspiring young people and all of us. I mean, including because of the clouds of his, of his being corrupt, etc., which I don't know and have no basis for making a judgment about that. That is my segue to what I think my most important. All the other four can actually be learned. The fifth is so important because it's about character, and it's about your charisma combined with the situation that you are facing with. So if you ask me very directly who I think has the most potential to have all five, but especially the fifth, based on what I would say Grace Paul would have the most and can grow into it. And I would say Mayor Duterte would have a chance, but he needs to expand his issues beyond federalism and peace and Mindanao. Because no matter how you look at it, even if he gets 100% vote in Mindanao and maybe 50% in Visayas, he still won't win. Yes, but
But sir, the question is not his chance to win.
I know.
It's
But
your choice.
yes, and so for me, someone like Duterte would also have all of this and the potential of all of this. And I really just, on a personal basis, my only question about Duterte is his human rights record. Since I'm a human rights lawyer, that's an important issue for me. He knows that too. I mean, because it's something that I'm very frank about. And to some extent, corruption and human rights for me are single issues, not to vote for a person, but not to vote. It's not a reason why I will vote for a person, but it's a reason not to vote for a person as a single issue.
All right. I'll save you for last. Yes?
Okay, I have a simple criteria, as I told you,
Yes.
integrity, inclusiveness, and innovation. So I haven't really studied everything about the candidates, and I don't know the people behind them, so I actually like Liling Briones' notion that we should know the people behind them, the potential cabinet, except Binay. I still don't know the potential cabinet, but I think they have already. So I think Binay qualifies in inclusiveness, but not the other two. So Grace Po would be integrity and inclusiveness. I don't know yet about innovation because she's always saying she's not prepared. So we have to find out who are the people who will form a potential cabinet. I think we know one person, Senator Chis Escudero, who is Vice President. Maro has integrity. He has to work more on inclusiveness. Perhaps innovation can also be part. So I already have two. And Duterte.
Are you saying they're a tie, Grace and Mar?
I would bring in a third one. Duterte would stand for integrity and inclusiveness, but perhaps lacking a little on innovation. But I think that's still.
So
Davao lacking in innovation.
you're saying that the man that's been called the
Yeah. So it's still a tie
sir,
for me, but
sir,
I think
the
Tony has
man
a
who
candidate.
people say has created the death squads of Davao is lacking in innovation because he was pretty innovative, possibly creating the death squads.
Well, I don't like that kind of innovation. That's
Fantastic.
why,
I wasn't talking about that kind of innovation.
So the human rights factor doesn't, or possibility of the human rights factor doesn't.
it is a part. It's part and parcel of a leader for me.
So of all the people you feel maybe have hit the two of your standards, who?
I would say Grace Po, Mar Rojas, and Duterte.
Okay.
But I don't want to exclude
Choose.
Binay. So Binay is the fourth. And once I find out who are the cabinet members, especially if Liling Briones will be part.
I'm not part of his,
Okay.
machinery.
Ma'am, these gentlemen, he sort of gave me two, but put one on top, and you sort of gave me maybe 3 or 4. Can you give me one, ma'am, of the 5, who you feel, because the
Will you
question,
kindly repeat your 5 again?
Binay, Duterte, Rojas, Grace Poe, Miriam Defensor Santiago, and I apologize for this, I may have missed the name, Ping Lacson.
Ping Lacson. Look at what he did for Yolanda. No budget, no powers at all. He was not even given an office. Look at what he did for PNP. So he would be the stern enforcer type you associate with somebody, with Ramos, who is generally accepted as a very successful president. But then you have to clarify also the human rights thing, although that's already settled by the Supreme Court. Pero that's another matter, what the public thinks of it.
It's very interesting how many human rights questions we have here.
But I want to add,
For me, Patricia, the human rights thing is
settled.
non-negotiable.
All right.
Non-negotiable.
I just wanted to say that I didn't talk about Mar. My main concern also, Mar, is on the 5th, which is which is for me is the most important thing, that to be able to inspire people. I mean, that is a big issue for me.
Okay. I'm really sorry to have made you guys wait. So, who was first? Yes.
Yeah. So this is not necessarily a question, maybe a comment or a suggestion. I think we're preparing for the elections, but the more urgent concern is the filing of the candidacies. So we have PH vote. What if we also launch PH run? Because if the leaders who qualify for the characteristics that we are discussing here will not run for presidency after all, like Cheche Lazaro or something, then we have to...
I support that completely.
We have to encourage these leaders to run, because in the end, if none of these leaders would run, then we're left with very poor choices, then we may end up not voting at all, if that's the wise thing to do. And the second suggestion is, there's a question a while ago about how to validate the facts about these people. So maybe Rappler can do a series of articles like what you did for Bongbong Marcos, and about all these candidates, presenting the facts, and maybe that is a concrete answer to the question on how we can validate. That when we read it on Rappler, we're going to trust it, and that it's going to be true about that candidate, and then we weigh those options. So just 2 suggestions.
So let me repeat what he said. When you read it on Rappler, of course you trust it. Thank you. And yes, we will start the Cheche Lazaro campaign.
Yeah, PH run, PH run.
PH run. Hashtag PH run. Yeah? We got it. Okay, question from over there.
So good afternoon. I am James Balicer from the University of Santo Tomas, Central Commission on Election. So my question addressed to the panelists is that, do you think it's about time to cost for the amendment of the provision in our Constitution with regard to the qualifications of the President? And if so, what specific qualifications should be added with that matter? So,
No.
Quick answers?
Every person who, under the Constitution and the law, can vote should be able to run for any position with minimum conditions of age, etc., as stated. But anyone in the same, otherwise you put a property, educational, some kind of discriminatory, all of that hasn't worked in the past.
Over here?
Good afternoon. I'll just have some remarks. Kasi yung kanina, sinabi daw that there is a lacking of genuine political parties. So may I ask, who are in the panel right now, does political ideology still exist sa ating government ngayon? Yun lang po, yun tanong ko po.
Who would like to take this?
Well, because ideology speaks about a cultural outlook, worldview. So based on the definition of a political party that has a real delineated program of government, I think we don't have those types of parties. That's why there's a need for a political strengthening law.
If I may comment, you might find ideological perspectives among the party list
Yeah.
parties.
I mean,
But not
Akbayan,
necessarily in the leading political parties, because if you take closer look at their ideology, they're essentially the same. The difference is on the personalities who are leading and the dynasties who are associated with these political parties. That's why it's so easy for them to flit from one party to another like butterflies.
Akbayan and Makabayan, I think,
Very clear.
have very clear ideological underpinnings.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Neil Holmes and I'm a graduate of De La Salle University, Dos Marinas. Before I ask my question, I would like to pose this example before the honorable panel, the character of President Barack Obama. Personally, in my opinion, I believe that America re-elected Barack Obama because he did not keep the presidency for himself, neither for his social class, for his ideology, or for his political party, but he kept the presidency for America because he is truly an American and he has been leading America the American way, meaning this leader, when he sets out goals, he or she will ensure that he will achieve it. So considering this example, and personally, I am sick of hearing the same names in our ballots every election. And it appears that in every election, most voters elect mostly the same sort of leaders and thus results to the same system. Do you think, is it high time for the electorates to consider putting technocrats into public office? Those people who are not relatively thick into politics. Personally, I would find President Barack Obama as not relatively thick into politics, considering that he graduated from Harvard Law, he worked his way through the Senate, and then now he has been assuming the position in the Oval Office for almost 2 terms. So, isn't it true also that the technocrats and
Sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but we have a lot of people lined up. Let's get to the question.
yes, isn't it true or more beneficial that if we put great weight in our personal criteria of people to vote, would it be better that we vote those technocrats, and could they be referred to as the next generation of leaders? If not for this upcoming elections, for the next elections to come.
I think Barack Obama is a good politician. He's not a technocrat. What we need in this country are good politicians because you need political skills, you need negotiation skills. In fact, Barack Obama faced a lot of challenges with the Congress. We have the same presidential system, so a president should have political skills and negotiation acumen.
As I said a while ago, the chances of a so-called technocrat winning at this particular time, or the so-called modern manager, one columnist asked, are we ready for a manager? Obviously referring to one candidate. We have to recognize that our people, our voters, still respond to candidates who not only touch their minds and give them hopes, but also touch their hearts. Those of you who are fans of the Dune series of fantasy books, there's one quotation there which I like very much. Blindness is not limited to the inability to see. Fanatics are blind in their thoughts, but many leaders are blind in their hearts. And Filipinos look also to the heart to convince them. And this is why I said a perfect response would be to have a very competent cabinet or a competent executive secretary. We saw that in our earlier, in our previous presidents, like Ramos, for example, Magsaysay had Vargas, and so on and so forth, where the executive secretary, in a sense, is made accountable and responsible for the implementations of the decisions of the cabinet. and to advise and to screen whatever policy that has to be formulated. And probably this is what we are looking for, because right now, I believe our people are not ready to let go of their hearts.
All right, last two questions, short questions, one answer from the panel. Go.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Meg Bonsalido from DLSU, and this question is for Professor Briones. Hi. So a while ago, you suggested that presidentiables should also announce their potential cabinet members, and which I might agree to, because the performance of these cabinet members will ultimately be felt in LGUs across the country. But however, will this not promote personality politics over political campaigns that focused on projects or issues, which was reiterated earlier in the other panel? Thank you.
If you will recall, when President Cory Aquino was elected, she created a committee headed by no less than the former chair of the Civil Service Commission. That's the advantage of very old people. They have very long memories. And this committee, headed by Pat Santo Tomas, was supposed to screen and to collect names, qualifications, etc., potential, not only secretaries, because the president signs the appointments of more than 5,000 employees. But since then, that kind of system, that kind of vetting has not been applied and is totally forgotten. And I'm sure your generation does not know about it, that there was a system of identifying. This is why during Marcos's time, you had the Career Executive Service training program, the Career Executive Service Board, where potential cabinet members from division level up to director level, up to secretaries have to undergo training in management, in operations, commitment, etc., and that they could be transferred from one office to the other without any problem at all. But then this system has not been continued.
Last question, short and sweet. Gentleman, she needs assistance. All right.
Good afternoon, most honorable members of the panel. I'm Javelin Moya from Colegio de San Juan de Letran. Earlier, you stated about the qualities such as integrity, inclusiveness, and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, I am heartily sorry for giving and stating and asking what seems to be the obvious. Are you blatantly saying that the current administration failed to give this nation the qualities of which you speak of? Thank you very much.
No, that's not the point. Really, it's a president is limited to one term, and so if the president can run, then he should be measured as well on the basis of those three criteria. So I laid down those criteria not to be a counterpoint to the current administration, but to provide a simple way. Of course, there are indicators for that, those three criteria. So it's not really what I mean by that.
Okay, we have a special request from social media. Apparently, our social media doesn't want to speak.
Hello. Yeah, hi. Hi, I'm Margie from Rappler social media team. We have a question from Twitter. Her name is Kiera Rubilios. We have varied standards and levels of contentment. Can this not hinder our joint aim of having the right leader?
Essentially, she was saying that because people have varying levels of contentment, will it not get in the way of picking a leader, which I think, of course.
Of course.
Explains
different
itself.
expectations, different.
But at the end of the day, what the majority of the voters vote for. At the end of the day, what the majority of the voters vote for, whether these are both votes, will determine the results of the elections.
Long live democracy.
That's why I said it's the leader we want. Then we start with the leader I want, but you have to talk to each other share your thoughts, find some way to actually say, this is the leader we want. Otherwise, you don't get the leader you as an individual want.
Okay, thank you.
And because this is, after all, a campaign to discover who it is, who the leader you want is, we won't ask for the leader we want yet. I think what's necessary is first to figure out who we want in a leader. And because I think it was terribly unfair to force you to choose like among candidates you may or may not possibly like, we'd like to give you the opportunity, may or may not. May or may not. We'd like to give you the opportunity because, as everyone has pointed out, the choices are names we've heard before and they are limited. If you could put a name on that list, is there anyone who exists now, still alive, and did not die in a plane crash? Is there anyone here in this country that you feel is the leader you want and you hope will run for the presidency?
Oh yeah, Leni Robredo. I would put her there as having all five, and I would put also probably Francis Pangilinan as well out there.
All right. So, Dean Lavinia for Francis Pangilinan. Sir. And Leni Robredo. So, two on the list from this very brave gentleman.
I also have Leni Robredo for obvious reasons. But I know Leni Robredo. Risa Ontiveros and Grace Poe.
All right. If this were an American Idol panel, Leni Robredo would be in. So, ma'am.
Right now, I can't think of anybody, but there would really be many of them. I would suggest that we go through the list of awardees in good governance in local government. And we have many very effective and dynamic governors, governors and local government executives. But of course, my preference would be from the Visayas and Mindanao because we have long been excluded from national decisions and national leadership.
I think if we were taking lesson from that, I think if people from the areas you speak of are anything like you, I don't think they'll allow themselves to be excluded anymore in the next elections. We're told we have one last social media question. Can we hear it from over there? Yes, Margie.
Hi, this one's from Marielle Fangre. We need a leader who will win. At what point do I vote for the lesser evil because who I want won't win?
I think we should not vote for leaders because they will win. This is a very common behavior among voters. They will vote whoever is llamado. We vote for who we want to be president, whether he will win or not.
And I think that's a perfect ending to tonight's very interesting interview with these very kind people. And of course, I won't leave you like that. Please give us your final words where I don't nail you to the wall in any way. Please, any of you, go ahead.
Can we look at the print, what we'll post later on and change our words? and say something safer. Anyway, that's okay. I'm actually at the stage of my life I really don't mind. I actually plan to retire next year. I'm on my last year in my term as a School of Government Dean of Ateneo, and I've actually told my president, a very good friend of mine, no possibility of extension. 10 years is enough in a institution, right? But anyway, having said that, no, I mean, I think the future is really up to you. As I said, 50% of the votes is 18 to 34 years old. I mean, and in that the majority is the younger votes are the majority. But as I said, you're not the majority. You yourself are college students, because the majority of that group, that 50% are actually high school graduates, which makes them a plurality in in the election. So what I want to suggest is you actually reach out also to your peers in different economic sectors, in different places in the Philippines, and have this common vision of the leader we want.
Do you feel that you have nothing to lose by what you said earlier, or would
Of
you like
course
to change
not.
some answers?
I'm actually voting for Jesse Robredo, but since he's dead, the memory lives on in the 3 I's: integrity, inclusiveness, and innovation. So remember to vote 3 I's. Remember Jesse Robredo: integrity, inclusiveness, innovation.
What I would just like to remind you of, based on our participation in 2 elections, is that even as we are busy with our studies, our researches, our debates, and so on and so forth, there are now groups which are spreading out into the provinces. They're already busy negotiating for victories. You know, you can buy a victory. They have tables of costs. You want to be governor, you want to be mayor. They're now busy training voters how to fill up the forms. They're called operators. And there is a cost. You want to be mayor, you want to be congressman, and maybe you want to be a senator, and it's going on. All the training, it's going on under our nose. And after this forum, for which we are grateful to Rappler, we will go back to what we do, to our schools, to our offices, and so on, hoping that the president that we want will emerge. I said at the beginning, we have to get out of our offices, out of our comfort zones, because those who will select our officials for us have been working already for several years. Whether it will be yung tagalabas, mayroon din silang table of costs, tinitext yun kung magkano, panalo, anong posisyon, konsihal, barangay captain, o mayor, or governor, papanalohin, kung may kalaban, tutumbahin ba o kikidnapin lang. That's one type. There are also the operators who already have updated lists of voters by not only by barangays, but by streets. And it's all computerized. And they're already training, they're already spending in terms of 2016. We are very, very, very late. And this is why, magkaiba kami ni Tony. Tony wants to retire. I am not retiring. I'm going to be 75. I will continue teaching. Thank you.
And I think we can testify we learned a lot from these wonderful people the last few minutes. One more sincere round of applause. Thank you very much, and I'd like to call my boss to the stage, who takes no responsibility for what I say. Ladies and gentlemen, Maria Ressa.
You are a great audience. First of all, thank you for building an inclusive democracy, for putting the panel together, and to the audience for for your attention. It has been a very, very full day. Thank you, July, for having us here. This is only the beginning, and let me pull up. I have you for 10 minutes. I promise not to go over that. Why? Because there are 2 things that are different in 2016. You've heard the youth, and then the second one is technology. We also heard that from Transparency International, right? So let's take that further. Why is this only the beginning? And I'll quickly show you what we need to do in the next year. If Dr. Briones says, if Liling Briones says that it started and we're late, we better start moving. Tony Lavinia said that the leader I want must transform to the leader we want. In this day and age, technology makes every person in this room very powerful, but you cannot do it alone. We somehow need to come together to actually collaborate to choose the leader we want. And that's what we'll try to do. I'll quickly take you through this. These are the 3 things, right, that we need. Let's go. Click, 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 click. The journalists are here. We are here with you. We won't do it without you. Number 2, Technology. Technology is there. And 3, it's us together, the crowd. And if you take all of that together, we use social media for crowdsourcing and big data. Let's go to the next slide. This is a tool to measure our community. Let's go to the tool itself. It's something that we created in Rappler. It's called Reach. Communities are important because one person can't do it alone. This is what the community we created today looks like in the virtual world. What does hashtag the leader I want look like? Okay, that's because I have a lot of followers. But if you look at it, type it in again. Can you type it in? Hashtag the leader I want. And let's see, because this is real time. It'll take the last 500 tweets, and we can zoom in and see the leader I want. If you want, you can use hashtag PHVote. So it'll go, what it'll take is the last 500 tweets. And why is that important? Because Tony is connected to me, is connected to Liling. If we are connected and we use our social networks in the same way a political party used to do it, in the virtual world, the growth is exponential, right? And so Tony Labs is now #1. Zoom in. Who's he connected to? Who's this? Archer's Desk. Let's this next one here. Sige, you can click that if you like that one. What happens is the larger the circle, the more powerful that account is, right? That means it's a force multiplier. It's like Arnold. Arnold, I cannot see the name, but Arnold is powerful. Let's look. So the larger the circle, the more powerful. Who's this? It's called eigenvector centrality, or like Google PageRank. That is Archer Desk. Okay, who's that? Move. So Move has been tweeting. Again, let's look down here. That's a large circle. And then Page. Okay, there are too many of us. And last, I want to see who this is. So you can take this. So you can look at and monitor your community, www.reach-social.com. The first 500 tweets actually will give you your community, right? And that's important because the way we build community is through 3 degrees of influence. Okay, so that's social media and technology. Next, let's go to crowdsourcing. How do you vote? Do you know we've been talking intellect all day? Do you know that more than 80% of how you make decisions is based on how you feel? So let's measure the way we feel. People talked about inspiration, right? So there's something, and again, this is something that you'd be able to use all year. The mood meter, we patented a user engagement model, okay? Click. Every story has a mood meter. We aim to give this. If you, for example, DLSU will give you, we're working on an API, so you can take that mood meter, plug it into the Mood Navigator. We will crowdsource how we feel about something. And the next slide, it'll give you things like this, which shows us the May elections in moods. This was the day before Election Day, and this was Election Day, this peak of anger. And you know, people were punching happy until about 7:30 at night when the results started coming in, and they were coming in slowly, and the red inched up. If you look again down here, that's the day the senators were announced. 77% happy for the month of May. And then if you look all the way down, that spike of anger has nothing to do with politics. It's Jessica Soho and Vice Ganda, if you remember. Right? Next. Let's go to the next. You can do it by minute. Let's look at the SONA. This year, it would be critically important. Your moods matter. If up to 80% of how we will make the decision together is based on how we feel, let's figure out how we feel. Next one. This is big data. And here's the part that scares me and what I think we all will need to work on. This is in 2013. Nearly 80,000 PCOS machines, and there were more than 20 million pieces of data every 20 minutes. Right? So I just quickly show you this. If you're plugged in to audio, let's click. Let's just play it. I'll play about a minute of it, and then. So this was May 2013, right? Mindanao, north, south, east, west. We all went to the poll, and look at the numbers. The numbers will be more this year. 53 million registered voters. Will probably be over 54 this year, right? So we will see this. We pull to the bird's eye view. From our granular leader I want to the big picture bird's eye view. This is what the results look like, right? That's what big data looks like, all of our votes. And you can see the pattern in the votes. There were 71 precincts that had 100% voter turnout. It has to start in our communities. If you look at all of it, it's there and it starts in your community, right? Okay, we'll go to the next. I want to give you, sige, click, click, click. We identified 6 issues, and we will spend the year asking you what is important to you. The first you heard, Winnie Monsod said it eloquently. Go back to corruption. Sorry, let's go back. Wow, she went ahead. So we started with corruption. Do you think this is an important issue? Is it the one that will make you, that matters to you? Hashtag Million People March. One Facebook post took 7 days to get 130,000 people in Luneta Park, August of 2013. Is it that powerful? Next one. So corruption is one of the 6 issues. Social inequality. Liling Briones, everybody's talked about this, the gap between the rich and the poor. It cannot be this way in your generation. The third, 8 out of 10 cities, the most vulnerable cities in the world, are in the Philippines. Do we want to elect officials who know nothing about the greatest problem we may face? Right? Climate change and disasters. Next, foreign policy, China, Spratlys, North Korea, cybercrime, ISIS. Next, sige, click. OFWs, more than 10 million, it's 10 to 12 million OFWs. Those are our best and the brightest. When they go overseas, what happens to our country? What happens to them? What happens to us? OFWs. Next, last, Mindanao, our breadbasket, peace and prosperity. Is it the tail that can wag the dog, or will we have more war? Will that be will that be where ISIS comes back in? 6, the journalists identified the 6. They may not matter to you, so it's up to you. Next slide. How do we sustain what we started today? We have a year. A year is enough time, even though we're starting late. How do we sustain this beyond today? Who will push for this and remind us about the importance of choosing our leaders? Who will take the lead? What roles will each one of us play? It is you, it is your generation, and technology empowers every single person in this room to actually be able to make a difference. And together, we will be able to create and find the leader we want. Let's leave it with this. What other issues matter to you? Please use the title, hashtag the leader I want, and tweet, converse. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it until SONA, and that's actually what we're after. What matters to you? What is important to you? And then let's crowdsource it. That's the part that's crowdsourcing. And by SONA, let's decide how we're going to pull together. The larger we are, the stronger we are together. And finally, it's a year long, and hopefully this time next year, we have found the qualities we're looking for. We've actually asked other people to join us, and the campaign is there. Are there others in that picture? Bongbong Marcos, we haven't really mentioned him there. Okay, and then the last one. Hashtag PH Vote. It isn't ours. We hope it's yours. It is all of ours. And again, if you look about it, let's use the tools. Your time, our time, technology makes us grow exponentially. Please let us use this to find the leader we want. Thank you. Let me call Glenda Gloria to close. And thank you for your patience and for being such a wonderful audience.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank the panelists and our sponsors here, the De La Salle University, as well as the members of the BID Consortium. There's no better way to kick off coverage and monitoring of a presidential race than a forum that tackles both the challenges and the qualities of leadership that are needed to address these challenges. The issues raised today are raised every election period. We must admit. The difference, however, is that we have the benefit of history. We have a political and social context that is quite different from a decade ago. And we have the tools that will help us learn from the bad choices that we have made. The leader we want, admittedly, is sometimes not the leader who gets elected. The leader we end up electing sometimes turns out to be the leader we don't want. Hopefully, this time around, in a field where voters are more engaged and involved, where technology will help them with the various tools to be better informed and take action, and where they ought to realize that at no other time in Philippine history are they more empowered. Hopefully, we will finally get to elect the leader we want. On behalf of Rappler, thank you very much for coming.
So thank you, everyone. And we'd also like to thank Archer Desk for their presence here today. Round of applause, everyone, for everyone else. On behalf of Rappler, we say thank you, and we hope that you discover the leader you want. Have a nice day, and thank you for being a great audience.